You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. Every year around this time, one of the most anticipated metrics that I always look forward to, and many of you do as well, is the blue chip ratio. So our friend Bud Elliott, guy who we've met at SEC Football Media Days and has become a friend and a good friend of ours here on the show as well, who comes on from time to time. Bud Elliott started this back in 2013. And it's referenced everywhere. People just reference the blue chip ratio. And if you're not familiar, what the blue chip ratio does is looks at a 4-year average of your recruiting and determines if your roster has more than 50% 4 and 5 stars, you have a chance to win the national championship. It's that simple. And it's never been wrong since they started using it back in 2013. Effectively, again, look at your roster and determine is more than half of your roster 4 and 5 stars. Because every national champion in that period has matched the blue chip ratio criteria. It's not to say if you have that number, you're going to win it. It's just to say that no team without that criteria has won a national championship in that period. So it is absolutely held out, and they've even gone back as far as you could have your recruiting models and things like that to see if it would actually work out. So back in 2011, for example, Bama won the title in 2011 with a 71% blue chip ratio. Even at the lowest, the closest was in 2013, Florida State was at 53%, and in 2016, Clemson was at 52%. So you're talking about this being a metric that has not failed. It's by the way not required to make the playoff. It's just that we saw TCU make the playoff, make it all the way to the championship game. But again, no team outside of the blue chip ratio has won the national championship since this metric has been in place. So let's get to the numbers. I will tell you, LSU is within the blue chip ratio metric. LSU's blue chip ratio is 70%, 70. So let's run through it. Ohio State is 1 at 90%. Again, remember, this is not including transfers. I'll get to that in a second. Ohio State at 90%. Alabama, 88%, Georgia, Texas A&M, Oregon, Oklahoma, Texas, LSU, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida, Miami, Penn State, Southern Cal, Michigan, and Auburn. Your national champion, according to the blue chip ratio, will be one of those 16 teams. Now, it is worth mentioning as well that as the transfer portal has been more in vogue, they have submitted another blue chip ratio that includes transfers. And much of it is the same. LSU actually bumped up a few spots. It's Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, Texas, LSU, Clemson, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, A&M, Florida, Penn State, Miami, Southern Cal, Michigan, Florida State. So a lot of the same schools that you'd see there. Notice one, and I have my takeaways. There is one very glaring omission. And I'll run through the names again just really quickly and tell me as I run through it if you don't think the name. Like think, okay, who are teams we talk about this year as national championship contenders, right? Playoff championship contenders. Think about who in your mind is there and who's not on this list. Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, A&M, Oregon, Oklahoma, Texas, LSU, Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida, Miami, Penn State, Southern Cal, Michigan, Auburn. Who did I leave off? Those little runts in Oxford. Tell you what, and even whenever I read off the names of the blue chip ratio teams with transfers, Ole Miss still ain't there. So, according to the blue chip ratio, Ole Miss has no chance of winning a national championship. I don't care what their betting odds say in Vegas. You look at history and the blue chip ratio, they don't qualify. So it was fascinating to see no Ole Miss, even with the transfer portal there. I will be very interested to see as time passes how the blue chip ratio might evolve or change, because think of it this way. Lance Hurd's a great example. Lance Hurd was a 5-star who signed with LSU. He ain't on the roster anymore. That would conceivably bump you down. It would, and also in theory, bump Tennessee up, adding a 5-star right there. When you look at the numbers, though, the portal movers, the biggest downward movers because of the portal, one of them makes a lot of sense, A&M. You lose Jimbo Fisher, had a bunch of transfers. They went from 79% from the high school recruiting to, with the portal transfers, 63%. I mean, A&M got gutted, is a way to say it. Oklahoma went from 73% to 63% when you include transfers. Obviously, losing Dylan Gabriel is a big deal. Bama went from 88% to 82%. I'm not going to do a Bama is burning thing right now, but just understand the thing I've told you all along, their roster got worse. It got worse. Again, I'm not saying they're not bad. They're still at 82%. It's a net loss minus 6 percentage points from 88% blue chip to 82% with the portal. Like, you brought in guys that weren't as good as the ones you lost, period. There's no other way around it. LSU actually improved with the portal. The other things I'll tell you that really struck me, aside from Ole Miss not being there, the teams just on the outside who could challenge the blue chip ratio are who could bust this metric. The two worth mentioning are Florida State. Florida State's blue chip ratio is at 49%. So they missed about 1 percentage point. Like, Florida State is right there. And then Tennessee's at 46%. So if Nico, their quarterback, pops, has an awesome season, gets you into the playoff, Tennessee could be there. There are no teams from the Big 12, which I thought fascinating as well. You lose Texas and Oklahoma, even bringing in Utah and in Arizona and some of those other teams. None of them meet the blue chip ratio criteria. But for me, I think the biggest question, the two fundamental changes in college football that will affect something like the blue chip ratio. Number one is obviously the transfer portal. How do you keep a 4-year average of recruiting classes and have it hold merit when you lose so many of those players year over year? I mean, LSU lost, I believe the number is 9 players from the 2024 signing class, or the 23 signing class. Those that just finished their freshman season. 9 players are already gone after 1 year. So when you lose that many, how do you keep that the integrity of a rolling average? The other thing is the expanded playoff. Like, you can't win the playoff if you don't get in. So there are really good teams that maybe got better as the season went along but lost early, so it cost them a shot at getting in the playoff. But now, in a 12-team format where, let's say you lose early, you go 10-2, but you get hot and get a good draw and you go and you win it, that could be different. The example I give all the time is 2001 LSU. And I know that's been, nearly a quarter century ago, but that team lost 3 games in conference, but by the end of the year, they were awesome. Rohan Davey, Josh Reed, Michael Clayton, LeBrandon Toefield, they were dynamite, man. They were such a good team. The defense had found its stride. They hung 50-49 on Illinois in the Sugar Bowl, who was the Big Ten champion. Nobody wanted to play that team. I'm not saying they would have beaten 2001 Miami in the championship game, but they won 31-20 against number 2 Tennessee in the SEC championship game with a backup quarterback. Nobody wanted to play that team, but they were a 3-loss team, so they had no shot. In a 12-team playoff, they would have won the SEC and gotten into the playoff with an auto bid, and nobody would have wanted any piece of that. You know what I mean? That's the variable that changes now with an expanded format and with auto bids for the conference champions. So just something worth filing away and how all of this could change and evolve. But the blue chip ratio is out. LSU's on the list, as you'd expect. Ole Miss isn't. And yes, Alabama's roster did, in fact, get worse. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.